Have a beverage. What is up, Atlanta? What is up, Internet? What is up, everybody? Welcome to ATL Uncut with Jeb Hart. As always, I'm Jeb Hart. There's a lot to get into in the hectic and condensed start of the Atlanta United 2019 campaign, but there's nothing more pressing than Atlanta United's upcoming clash with Mexican powerhouse Monterrey. Now, there is no better person we could bring on to help preview this than ESPN FC's Mexican national team correspondent. You might recognize him from his many appearances on ESPN FC, ESPN, BBC World News, go on and on and on, every website you could think of. Simply put, he is the English language expert on Mexican football. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Tom Marshall. Tom, thank you for taking the time, bud.
Oh, thanks a lot, Jeb. You're making me blush there a little bit with that introduction.
It's well deserved. The history speaks for itself, man. Well, we here in Atlanta, we had a rough weekend. Well, we don't want to talk about it at this point because I'm playing that entire game against DC was a Monterrey bait and switch, and you can't convince me any differently. I want to get into obviously Monterrey and what you see with this upcoming game and this upcoming tie, but genuinely, what do you know about Atlanta United, and what do you think that the team in Monterrey thinks of the competition they're going to face with Atlanta United coming down there?
No, I mean, obviously, I'm probably a little bit more tied into what's going on in MLS compared to most kind of Mexican journalists who are mainly focused on Liga MX and what's going on with the league. So, I think people know about Atlanta. Having said that, I mean, because of the Tata Martino rumors that started way before that final, I think everybody was focused on watching that game, watching the final, the MLS Cup, and seeing what kind of team Atlanta is, seeing how Tata Martino's teams play. So I think people have got a really good idea of what Atlanta is all about. Obviously, there's been a massive buzz about the team. And then I think that's stretched down to Mexico over the last couple of years. But the only thing I would say is that, going up against Monterrey, this is now the challenge. I mean, you could argue that it doesn't get any more difficult than Monterrey. I mean, you've got Monterrey, you've got Tigres. For me, the two best Liga MX teams. And then after that, obviously, it goes down. But I mean, Monterrey is arguably, the deepest squad in Liga MX, one of the most expensively assembled squads, not just in CONCACAF, but the whole Americas. I mean, this is a massive challenge for Atlanta. And, this is the beauty of the game. I mean, you can make an argument this is the best team in Mexico against the best team in MLS. And that's what it's going to be all about over the next, 9-10 days.
And I think that Atlanta finds itself in a very unique position in this particular ties because even at their inception, they've been underdogs in games before. Obviously, you go away, we played against Red Bulls who had our number, and in Vegas they were underdogs. But on paper, we have been better than almost every team we've played. But in this particular instance, we're not. And I think it's the first time that Atlanta has played a team that is on paper and on the field flat out better than them. They've played teams that have played them in such a fashion. DC has done it historically. Red Bulls have done it to where it makes their talent, a little less, on the forefront. But on paper, they've always been better. This is a new thing for them to play a team because you're talking about most expensive. Atlanta United on Transfermarkt is valued at just about $60 million, and Monterrey is at about 81. So I mean, this is the biggest test they've ever faced in an environment that, obviously there are people on the team that have been in, Copa Sudamericanas, Copa Libertadores, things like that. So they've been in this sort of stuff, but this is a step up for the team as a whole, and it's a challenge.
No doubt about it. I think from both sides as well. I'm not sure Monterrey would have wanted to face Atlanta, to be honest, this early in the competition. And, I think that's the interesting thing as well. You say there that, Atlanta going up against a Monterrey team that is, has got so much money behind it. They've got 14 full internationals in the squad. And when we're talking about, international, we're talking Mexico, Colombia, Argentina. I mean, we're not talking kind of, with full respect, the Central American nations. I mean, top countries. And so, yeah, I mean, this is, arguably one of the best squads Liga MX has ever seen. But it's interesting because if you put Atlanta within Liga MX, then I think, I think they obviously would be challenging, you know what I mean? But I still see, I think Monterrey just about favourite for this one. But and also they've been playing quite a few more weeks now as well. And I think that's an important factor. Diego Alonso, the coach, the head coach, has been, he's been rotating. It was very interesting that I was actually at the game against Chivas on Saturday night. And Alonso rested 3 key players. And it's fascinating to see now in Mexico over the last couple of years. I think we've seen kind of the coaches really prioritizing a little bit more the CONCACAF Champions League, whereas a few years ago, I mean, it was the opposite. It was kind of CONCACAF Champions League is coming up. Okay, let's rest a few of the big names. Let's kind of, put the competition to one side and focus on Liga MX. But on Saturday, you had, Aviles Hurtado, who's, one of Monterrey's best players forward, rested. You had Rogelio Funes Mori rested as well on the bench. And Maximiliano Mesa, who is almost like the Pity Martinez of Monterrey in terms of a big money signing coming straight from Argentina, Argentine international. Probably not as, it's not being talked about as much as obviously Pity Martinez to Atlanta, but, a big name, a guy who got minutes for Argentina, during the World Cup. So, yeah, honestly, I can't wait to see how this plays out. And I think this is, from the Atlanta point of view, it's kind of, this is the next test now. I mean, there was always that question, first season, how good are they? Second season, can they win it? And they kind of check those boxes. Now it's like, how does it translate? And really the challenge doesn't come much bigger than a trip to Monterrey.
I mean, and in the first, you were talking about, them being in season form and being able to rest players. And that's kind of always been just the rub of it with MLS schedules being the way they are. I mean, our first game against Herediano, it was the first game that they played as a team under Frank de Boer as the first competitive match, just because that's how the schedule works out. And obviously, if you're making a chart, a pros and cons chart, like obviously we had more talent, more ability, more skill. The team was just inherently better, but you're going against a team that is in Herediano that was in mid-season form. And there you can't really account for that on a sheet of paper, but it matters. And Atlanta, this is going to be their 4th, competitive match against a Liga MX team that is an absolute unit. And, at their home ground, who is in full season form, and we're under a, new manager trying to find our feet in a manner of speaking. And so, I mean, it is an absolute challenge. You wrote a article for ESPN very recently, and the title was, and it was very hurtful to me if I'm being honest, Monterrey are dominant in Liga MX, but their best might come versus Atlanta United in CONCACAF Champions League. That's a rather daunting headline for me to read, and from an Atlanta United perspective. So, just give it to me straight, man. What are we getting ourselves into here?
No, yeah, honestly though, I think the other side, the flip side to that is that, part of the thing I was writing in the piece is that, Monterrey, you look at how well they've done this season in terms of results, but, you look at that series against Alianza in the CONCACAF Champions League, they won 1-0. They faced so much criticism for that performance because they just couldn't put away a team from El Salvador. And when so much has been invested in your squad, the press don't like that. The fans kind of got on the team's back, despite the great results. So I don't know. It's just my feeling with this Monterrey team is that they're getting the job done. I don't think Alonso has been given enough credit because to manage so many international players, to establish a playing style, it's difficult because there's been a big change from the previous coach to this one. Almost like what's happening in Atlanta right now. So I think he deserves praise for what he's done. But I do think there's another gear. They're not kind of blowing teams away. Even in Liga MX, they drew 0-0 against Puebla, and Puebla are one of the smallest teams. I don't know, it just feels like, yeah, they're getting the job done. Yeah, the quality is there. The individual players can win the game. I mean, there's absolutely no doubt about that. But I do see when I watch them, there's like kind of moments in the game of lack of concentration. They let their other team back into the game when you feel like they should be dominant, even more dominant, if you know what I mean. And so, yeah, I think they've got another level to step up to. It's just, and this is now the crucial phase of the season, because it's not just these two games against Atlanta, but on Saturday, Monterrey playing against Tigres. And that is, I mean, you can't really stress how big a game that is for both clubs. For me, it's the best game in Mexican football. I mean, the rivalry is so intense, so passionate, the quality that evolved so high that, it compares to other, top quality world derbies out there. So, so that's going to be something to watch out for as well over the next kind of 10 days. What is Alonso going to do? How is he going to manage the squad between the two games against Atlanta and the Saturday game against Tigres? But yeah, I think no doubt about it, Monterrey, they're looking to win this competition. It's not kind of like, we're going to put all the eggs in the basket of the Liga MX. I mean, Monterrey, they spent so much money, they've got so much depth that they're almost obligated to win. And I think that's goes back to the article in terms of Alonso's faced quite a lot of criticism because of the style of play and these kind of things. But at the end of the day, he will be judged by the trophies, and he has to win the trophies to actually, to earn the respect of the fans, I feel.
Yeah, so like you were saying, they went Chivas this weekend, Atlanta, Tigres, Atlanta in a 4-game stretch within less than 14 days. And so, or about 14, math is not really my thing. So they rested starters, I know, for the game against Chivas and won 2-0. But it was slightly less of an important game than the Tigres game is. Do you think that having that massive rivalry game coming up in any way affects the way they set their lineup for the home tie against Atlanta in Monterrey?
I don't think so, no. I think that the other thing is, though, there's so little difference sometimes between the starters, if you know what I mean. It's not like you've got an A team and a B team. You've got certain positions on the field that are kind of so disputed that it doesn't really matter who you put in, if you know what I mean. So I think there will be a few changes, but I don't think they're going to be massive changes. Having said that, if you're Monterrey, you don't want that game on Saturday. I mean, that's the last game you want to play. You don't want to play the biggest game of the season in between the two biggest games of the season so far, in terms of the games against Atlanta. So yeah, it's not ideal from Monterrey's point of view. Have they got the squad to deal with it? Yeah. But they wouldn't have wanted to have it that way. So yeah, I mean, we'll see what Alonso does. But he has been very clever in kind of just gradually rotating, keeping players fresh. So I expect to see 3 to 4 changes between the team that played against Chivas compared to the team that plays Atlanta, and then the team that plays Atlanta compared to the team that goes out to face Tigres on Saturday.
And I'm incredibly excited about this game, strictly from an on the field perspective. And our first game against Herediano was about as CONCACAF-y as you can get. You're playing in their stadium in Costa Rica that's got AstroTurf from 1992, and the ball's bouncing all over the place. I mean, Monterrey is one of the. I mean, we're talking about the two teams playing in two of some of the most beautiful stadiums in the world. So, I mean, it's a proper pitch. It's a proper playing field. It's two proper teams going at it on a – I mean, we'll see how the officiating shakes out, because that's always a big old asterisk in these competitions. But, I mean, how do you see it shaking out? Because I'm thinking about it in two different ways, because I think, pragmatically, which I think under Tata – they would probably try to go in there and try to win, because Tata would go for it. He would, that was just who he was. He knew what he had, trusted, and went for it. I think Frank de Boer is more pragmatic in a sense. So he's played younger people. He's changed the lineup. Obviously, it's a very small sample size, but it seems, historically that's what it is. I mean, if Atlanta can get out of Monterrey 0-0 or just down one, I think they need to do. It's something they have never had to do before. It was like we discussed earlier. They've never been an on-paper underdog in any match they've ever played because it's their first major international competition. And the squad they put together is incredibly talented. And so they've never really had to say, this team is better than us. We have to bunker and get them at home. So I don't even know if they're capable of doing that because they've never done it before. So it's just an incredibly interesting, chess game that they're trying to play, and I don't know how it's going to shake out.
Yeah, I mean, I think both. I think we're going to see a cautious first leg, to be honest. I'd like to say the opposite, and they're both going to go after each other. But I think it's going to. I think if you look at the forward line of both teams and the individuals that they've got and the way they can turn a game with, if you give them space, I just don't think either one of the coaches is going to be willing to kind of, Monterrey under Alonso. One of the criticisms has actually been, look how good your squad is and why you're not playing kind of more fluid, going forward a bit more. He's been they control the game, but sometimes they control the game without having the ball. So they're very well set up. They've got 4 consecutive clean sheets coming into this game. So they're very well organised defensively. It's like I wrote in that piece on ESPN. It's kind of, they're a team that is kind of multifaceted. I mean, if a team wants to sit back against them, drop deep, give them the ball, then they've got players like Mesa, like Rodolfo Pizarro, who are creative enough to kind of open the defence. And if you want to play on the counter attack, like they did a lot against Chivas last Saturday, I think they had like 35-37% possession, but they're very, very comfortable doing that. And you look at players like Dolan Pavon, Aviles Hurtado, and they hit you. They do real damage on the break. So I don't know. I just think both teams know that. And to be honest, I think it's going to be, especially the first leg, I think it's going to be really tight. But obviously Monterrey, even going into the second leg, we know about Atlanta's home support, but I don't think Monterrey are going to feel that if they can only get a 0-0 draw at home, the massive underdogs in that second leg. I think the away goal will come into play as well. I'm sure Monterrey won't want to be giving up too much space to Jose Martinez, for example. So I think we're going to see a cautious first 90 minutes, to be honest.
I mean, that's kind of what I'm trying to suss out myself, is because it's strangely some kind of an advantage in the fact that Frank de Boer, this is his 4th competitive game. There's no tape out there. I mean, if you go, you can assume how they're going to set up, assume how they're going to play based on his history or based on the way they played last year, but it's a different coach. It's a different, there's so little that's known about how they're going to approach it that I don't know from, the Monterrey side of things, how you can sit there and game. Obviously, you can look at last year and say, this is what Josef does in the 18. These are the runs he makes. These are the, make sure you mark him here. When, obviously you can go and look at thousands of hours of films of PT at River Plate and say, this is the run he likes. But it's so many pieces you're putting together, and it's a huge negative from Atlanta's side that they don't have that continuity. But at the same time, it's also a little bit of a positive because there's zero idea of what they're going to do, really. I mean, you can make some guesses, but Monterrey doesn't have enough film to say, this is how they play a back and forth. This is how they shift from a back 3, then turns into a back 5. Really, there's nothing there. So, I mean, it's a roll of the dice as to how it shakes out, but I think if they play it well, it could play as an advantage, that unknown.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a more kind of firepower for the argument that Monterrey aren't going to fly out the blocks. They're not going to be kind of leaving a load of space behind because they know the damage first that Atlanta can do up front, and maybe they're not completely sure about how it's going to how Frank de Boer is going to set up. So yeah, I mean, but I think that's Diego Alonso. He has been quite cautious as well this season. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm guessing that Monterrey go out like that. And like I said, I don't think they're going to be – it's not going to be a disaster for Monterrey if it's 0-0 in the first leg. Having said that, if Monterrey do kind of start firing and, Atlanta just coming into the preseason, then it could be dangerous, you know what I mean? But I think we'll also see from the Monterrey point of view, kind of a couple of decisions from Alonso before the game when we see the starting 11 that will help us kind of see his kind of mindset. And one of them, for example, is he going to play Vangione at left back or is he going to play Gallardo? Because if it's Vangione, he's more defensive-minded. He tends to stay back a little bit more. If he plays Jesus Gallardo, who's basically a converted winger, then I think, it points to him kind of, wanting to take the game more to Atlanta. So stuff like that's going to be the actual starting 11 from the Monterrey team is going to be interesting as well. I mean, Celso Ortiz, the central midfielder. I think Jonathan Gonzalez is probably going to start for Monterrey, and probably Carlos Rodriguez. So you basically got, if those two start, you've got a 22-year-old central midfielder alongside a 19-year-old. So if both of those two start, I think that shows again that Alonso is kind of being a little bit less cautious. Whereas if it's Ortiz in there, more experienced, kind of positionally better, not as intense, but he knows where to place himself, then I think it shows Monterrey giving a little bit more respect to Atlanta as well. But yeah, I mean, I think even if it's not a kind of open end-to-end game, it's going to be absolutely fascinating. I think this is the type of game that this competition just it needs. I mean, it's kind of in the kind of perception, especially of the Mexican fan, the Mexican journalist, the Mexican media. Obviously we saw last season with Toronto and how well they did against Tigres, against Club America, and then almost to get there against Chivas being so close to win it. Obviously you get people sitting up and taking notice, but you need more of those and basically need an MLS team to go on and win this competition in the near future, because at that point, that's when the media is going to kind of explode and go, what is going on here? It's not just, obviously we saw Sporting Kansas City destroy Toluca. It kind of went under the radar, to be honest, in the Mexican press. It's going to be when an MLS team wins the competition that we're going to kind of finally see Mexico kind of, I don't know, really start looking at MLS and thinking, wait up, they're not just kind of catching now, they might be on that level. And I think that's the games like this one between Atlanta and Monterrey are obviously a kind of, they will be used as a barometer in Mexico as to the success of MLS and the growth of quality of MLS.
Yeah, I definitely want to circle back to the game because there's more that I want to get to. But you brought up a point that I want to touch on, and that's obviously this competition has almost exclusively been won by Liga MX teams. I mean, there's, Saprissa has done, there's, sprinkled about, but I mean, it's been a Liga MX dominated tournament since its inception. And MLS in recent years has made some runs. They've, obviously Toronto last year and been some people, but in the perception of the MLS within League MX is obviously they are, directly competing while being, just parallelly running. It's a strange kind of narrative because there's a competition between them that's not direct, and I don't, and this could be just my own personal biases on it because I'm obviously an Atlanta fan. I've watched the MLS for a long time, but I've seen the shift in the league towards kind of an exponential growth curve. It's been this, obviously the MLS 1.0, 2.0, and it's kind of changed the way it is. Obviously with Atlanta and, with Miguel Almiron and P.T. Martinez and these jump ups in, these different tiers that are kind of catching up. What is the Mexican perception of MLS? And would an MLS team winning the CONCACAF Champions League be akin to the U.S. men's basketball team not winning gold at the at the Olympics? Would it just be flabbergasting to everybody?
It's a difficult one. I mean, obviously, if you follow the league a little bit more, then you can see stuff like, the TAM money, the GAM money. Basically, clubs have now got more. They've got more spending power, and I think that has been one of the traditional kind of things holding back MLS, as in terms of quality compared to the Mexican clubs. So now I think we're seeing, obviously, better quality MLS teams, and Atlanta is probably the best example. But I think we're also seeing, I think there's more respect in Mexico, to be honest. I think and when an MLS team does win it, then I think people will sit up and take notice because, I think it's 13 times on a row that, the Liga MX teams have won this competition. I don't know. I mean, from a Mexican point of view, it's difficult. If you're an editor of a Mexican newspaper or a Mexican website, it's kind of difficult to give column inches, to give debate, to give time on the TV to a tournament which the clubs pretty much always win. So, I mean, that's the perspective. I mean, MLS clubs absolutely have to win this competition to make kind of people in Mexico sit up and take notice. And therefore, I think the extension of that is that this competition is going to benefit a lot. As much competition as there is, and this is the great thing about the kind of the new format as well, because it's basically set up to create quarterfinals that are MLS Liga MX. I think that I think it's going to happen given time. I think that obviously it's difficult for the MLS teams, especially Atlanta. I mean, I really do think that they've kind of pulled the short straw to play Monterrey at this stage. You know what I mean? It was a semi-final. Obviously, Atlanta would be a few games deeper into the season. But yeah, I mean, I think Toronto provided a template. I think you saw Sporting Kansas City as well. I don't think it's a results thing. And I think Mexican football is. I think the Mexican football fan cares about aesthetics. It cares about style of play. Cares about how you win a game, not just winning the game. And I think that you saw Sporting Kansas City go to Toluca and play with an authority, kind of playing out the back. We've seen it with Atlanta, and this is a bit of a shame that Tata Martino's still not with Atlanta, because I think that would have changed the perception, quite a way as well. But I'm sure under Frank de Boer, for example, Atlanta are going to go to Monterrey and play out the back, and they're going to pass the ball around. They're not going to kind of pump it forward, which I think that historically Mexican fans have seen MLS clubs play maybe a more direct game, and it kind of puts them off. It kind of think, these guys aren't technical. I think, and just my perception, that the average Mexican soccer fan really appreciates technical ability, really appreciates teams that play along the ground. And I think that, that has changed a little bit. The perception is changing. And I think teams like Atlanta kind of do have helped that. And obviously this game is another kind of facet of this game against Monterrey, no? I mean, how are Atlanta gonna approach it?
That is the $1 million question I would love to know the answer to, so I can sleep a little bit better these next couple of days. But we'll have to wait and shake that one out. But yeah, no, to your point, yeah. I mean, yeah, the Toluca fans were olaying the passes by the SKC. I don't know if that was so much their just disappointment with how their team has performed this year, because I know it's been not how they drew it up, but there was like a level of respect on that end that I thought was kind of interesting. But so back to the game itself. If you were going to pick out a weakness, I mean, outside of, a 34-year-old goalkeeper in Marcelo who's kind of been prone to some mistakes, I mean, outside of that, looking at Atlanta's attack, their midfield, and the fact that they have wingers that go forward hard if it was required. Obviously, again, we're making hypothetical assessments of a game plan, because they could sit back and have 9 people in the back. We have no idea. But where were you if you were Frank de Boer going into Monterrey and it was going to be a standard wide open game? Where would you attack? Where are the weaknesses in Monterrey?
I think if it's Jonathan Gonzalez and Carlos Rodriguez in central midfield, I think those guys kind of push forward. They press quite high up. I think they leave a lot of space in front of the defence. I think if Miguel Layún is playing at right back, I think behind him, I think if it's Basanta and Nico Sanchez or even Montes, none of the centre backs are particularly quick. So, look for balls, behind the defence. And I also think psychologically Atlanta could potentially play with Monterrey in terms of Monterrey haven't had very good results kind of in the home stadium in the big games. So I think that's something Atlanta can kind of, maybe before the game talk about a little bit. But yeah, I mean, and I think just stay as tight as possible, hit on the break. I mean, play on their own game, and yeah, and also concentration. I think Monterrey, they always they give you opportunities. I mean, if you can hold it down at the back, if you can cope with the offensive power that they have, then they do give you opportunities. It's not like a team it's not like Tigres, for example, that kind of goes out and has 70% possession and you don't get the ball. They give you the ball. Monterrey, give you the ball. They give you opportunities, and if you know what you're doing with it, then I think that Atlanta will have a decent chance. But yeah, Jeb, I'm gonna have to run off.
Well, that is completely fine. Before you run off, how do you see this ending up?
I don't know. It's such a difficult one, and this is the beauty of it. It's so difficult to predict. I have to go just about Monterrey, and I say that because I think the main factor is that I think Alonso has managed his squad really well. I think the players are going to be fresh, and I think there's not much between these teams. I don't think the difference, I believe, is that Monterrey are right in the season. They're obviously unbeaten in 2019, and I think that Atlanta, unfortunately, don't have Tata Martino anymore, and obviously with Frank only just coming in, I think that's a disadvantage. I think if this was, if Frank de Boer had 3-4 months, it might be different. But I think because of that, I have to take Monterrey, but only one goal in it. I don't think there's going to be much in it at all.
Well, absolutely, man. I know you got to run, but thank you so much for your time, and I'd love to chat with you on the second leg if you have the time permitting, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jeb. Much appreciated, and thanks a lot for the invite, and enjoy the game wherever you guys are watching it from.
Cheers, bud. I appreciate it, man.
Bye.
Then we're good. Thank you, man. Dude, I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeb.
I really, really appreciate it. It was a great chat, bud.
No worries. Yeah, give us a shout then.